thanks for checking this out. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. When I first started playing Native Flute, I would listen obsessively to any recording of Native Flute music I could get a hold of. We're talking CDs at the time, so entire albums. And I would just listen. So here are 7 classic Native American flute albums that really made a difference for me. I could easily have made a list several times this length. One of the things I really treasure about my flute journey is that there are a lot of artists who I started out as fans of their music and then eventually actually had the chance to perform and or record with them. And all of those relationships mean a great deal to me. So if you'd like to hear more videos like this, more music recommendations, and a little bit more about my own flute journey, hit that like button and maybe leave a bird emoji in the comment section so that I know you want more. Now, here are the guidelines I use for today's list. Everything on today's list had to be released before I released my own first Native Flute project. Now, my first project came out in 2003, Heartbeats of the Forest World. So all of the albums here were released 2002 and before. And all of these albums had a direct influence on the way I play flute or the way I think about making flute music. So let's get started. Unfortunately, because of copyright issues, we're not actually going to get to listen to any of the albums I'm talking about today. We'll have to be satisfied with talking about them. And the first one I'm actually going to talk about some extra, more than any of the others. And if you've watched this channel much, you won't be at all surprised by this choice. Number 1 on my list is R.C. Nakai's Canyon Trilogy. This is arguably the most influential disc of Native American flute music ever recorded. It's certainly the best-selling, but that's not why it matters to me. It matters to me because it quite literally changed my life. This was released in 1989 on Canyon Records. At the time, I had recently completed a doctorate in music composition, and my music was being played fairly regularly throughout the United States and also in Europe. I had a New York publisher for some of the music that I was making, and I was performing on keyboards quite a lot all over the place too. So things were going pretty swimmingly, you would think. But the problem was I really wasn't enjoying much of the music I was making. I really felt that in jumping through those academic hoops to get those music degrees, some essential life connection had been lost in my music. So I was really floundering around a bit, trying to find my way back to a more traditional, intuitive way of making music. I stumbled on Canyon Trilogy quite by accident at a native trade shop in the area, and when I listened to it, of course, I was immediately drawn into the beautiful solo flute sound world that Nakai had created. But as I listened more, I found that it rewarded attentive, careful listenings. And I began to realize that Nakai had found what I was looking for. He was playing on a traditionally based instrument, and he was using really very simple musical materials to create very sophisticated and unique pieces of music. There's a fierce musical intelligence underlying all this beautiful stuff that's going on here. So I decided I had to find a flute. I since have had the honor of performing with Mr. Nakai and working with him in different contexts. And of course, that's been a real highlight of my flute journey. But I will always be grateful to him just for making Canyon Trilogy. Number 2 on my list is Love Songs of the Lakota by Kevin Locke, released on India House in 1982. I've talked about this album before, and in my next video, we're going to deep dive one of the tracks on it, so I'm not going to talk about it a whole lot more today. But I spent a lot of time learning to play a lot of the songs on this disc. They're Lakota songs. I'm Cherokee. They're not mine to share, so I've never performed them in public. But I learned an awful lot about flute playing by trying to play them. And I know that Mr. Locke's style has influenced my own quite a bit. Next up is Songs of the Indian Flute Volume 2 by John Rayner Jr. This was an independent release from 1996. Mr. Rayner was a great educator in addition to being a fine flute player, so since I taught a lot at university, I kind of feel that connection with him also, although I never had the pleasure of meeting him. There are solo flute songs here, and then there are also some songs that are accompanied by guitar and string pads and things like that, and very tasteful arrangements. It's a very honest disc. It's a very direct playing with a lot of integrity about it, and I still return to it fairly often. Always enjoy it when I do. Next on my list is an evocative project called Eagle's Journey into Dawn by Ronald Roybal. It's an independent release from 1999. Roybal's an excellent guitar player in addition to being a fine flute player, and this disc is mostly duets with him covering both the guitar and the flute parts. I was raised as a keyboard player, so the idea of making duets with yourself was intriguing, but beyond that, it's Roybal's flute playing that really drew me in here. I've heard so many Native American flute projects where the flute is basically noodling around on stock beginner mode patterns while the rest of the musicians are really working it. Not on this disc. With Roybal, the flute is a full partner with the guitar on all of these duets. And that set a real standard for me in my own music for flute and other instruments. Number 5 on my list is an artist and a project that are beloved by many, many people. Mary Youngblood's The Offering, released on Silverwave in 2002. It's a magical disc of solo flute songs that was recorded in a cave using the natural resonance of the cave for reverb, and there are beautiful little water drips and all kinds of things like that along the way as well. It's really the depth and the power of Mary's sound here that really got me excited and, in fact, inspired me to work on my breathing a lot more than I already was. I still use the title track as a useful reference track for beginning flute players. If you haven't heard it, give it a listen and you'll hear why it is an absolute favorite for an awful lot of Native American flute enthusiasts. Number 6 actually might be the second most influential disc of Native American flute music for me. It was released in 2002 on Makoche label, Legend of the Warrior by Joseph Firecrow. I still remember the very first time I listened to this disc. One sitting, beginning to end, straight through, and then hit the replay button and immediately went around again. I was blown away by the variety of musical styles and textures here and by the sheer energy of the music making. This is music that is fully connected to the drum beat that guides almost all indigenous music making. For years, one of the tracks from this disc was set as my phone alarm to wake me up in the morning. Now, I only got to play with Joe once, only got to hang out with him for a little while, but we shared some really good stories, some good laughs, and some really good music making. He left us way too soon. To be honest, I haven't been able to listen to this disc since he did go. Maybe this will be the year that it'll feel okay again. The last disc for today is a compilation disc called Tribal Winds. It was released on Earthbeat's label in 1995. All of the tracks here are drawn from other projects that were released in the early to mid-90s. Sometimes a compilation disc can be a really good way to get introduced to new artists and find new music to explore, just the way a good poetry or short story anthology can be. There are 14 tracks here from 12 different artists, so it's a pretty generous sampling. Some of the people we've already talked about are on this disc. But some of the others that I particularly enjoy here are Brian Akipa and Keith Bear. 3 of the artists we've talked about today have already crossed over and become good ancestors, and I know that at least one of the others has suffered some severe medical issues. Collectively, and with some other people that I didn't have time to think about today, we can really think of these players as the foundation of contemporary Native American flute playing. It's really important to remember and honor the contributions they've made. Now, this was a very personal list. You probably have people that really influenced you that I didn't talk about. So if you do, please leave those in the comment section so that other people can check them out. That's about it for today. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit those like and subscribe buttons. It helps. And if you'd like more videos with music recommendations and some bits about my own musical journey, maybe leave a bird emoji in the comments. Thanks for hanging out. Check back in next time when we'll be doing a deep dive into a Kevin Locke track that uses a really interesting mode.